All right, hey there. Normally I am shooting my videos in my office, but today we're mixing it up. We're in the den. Fire is behind me. This is my daily, in the evening, my happy spot. See, for the months of December, January, and February, you'll find me right here. Fire's going, got the cushion, got a book on my phone, and I'm reading. It's just what I do, man. It's February, and baby, it's cold outside, but before you know it, it's summer. And before you know it, we're staring in the face our summer camps and mission trips. So that brings us right back into our conversation. Dude, what are we going to be doing this summer for our mission trips? For some of you, you actually are pulling off your normal summer missions trips because you're not being affected where you live and or where you're going. Things are open. You're not really affected. But that's not true for most. For most of the persons that I've been having conversations with, most youth workers I know are still trying to come up with a game plan that's a different game plan. So what we're doing today with this focus video is taking Robbie's and my conversation and going deeper with it. I got a number of things I've written out here to provide you some options, some ideas, some suggestions of what you can do during this summer for missions during this COVID culture that we're still in. Before I jump in though, I wanted to point a few things out. First of all, I want you to look at me in this. I honestly want to say thank you. I really mean that. Hey, what am I thanking you for? Well, here it is. Thank you for believing in teenagers, for loving students, for understanding their worth and their value. Because most people in your church, if they're honest, don't want to spend time with teenagers. Most people in your church could not even comprehend spending a number of days, a week, 2 weeks with teenagers. Most adults in your church would certainly not consider spending a week or 2 weeks with teenagers and being responsible for their security and their safety on a mission trip. And for you, you just roll up the sleeves and you do it, man. That's your game, that's your jam, that's what you do. So I want to say thank you. I also want us to think about this. For all of you who are viewing and listening to this, I want you to realize that all of you are under different circumstances, in different ministry contexts, and even are in different COVID circumstances. So for example, different circumstances, right? Here we go. For many of you watching this, you may be a rookie. For many of you watching this, you may be 3 to 5, 8 to 10 years in student ministry. So for some of you watching this, you've been 15, 20, 25 years or more in student ministry. So your circumstances are different. You as a viewer are listening to me, and you're going to be listening through your lens of your own circumstances. Whereas another viewer has different circumstances. We all have different ministry contexts. For some of you, I think budget. For some of you, you have very extensive and expansive budgets. For some, it's more of a moderate budget, but you still have some wiggle room. You can do some things. For some of you, you don't have a youth min budget, and raise my hand, that was my first 2 youth ministries. The only budget we had is what we raised. It was a self-providing youth budget. So when it comes to things like missions trips, maybe you're more limited than your buddy down the road because they have a larger church and a larger budget, and you're more limited. So keep in mind, we all have different ministry contexts. We also have different COVID restrictions. Some of you, it's very open where you're at, or it's more moderately open. And like where I used to live in Seattle, my friends up there, it's still very tight. There's very few things they can do. So what I'm saying is this: as you listen to this and I provide some options, provide some suggestions, just take them as that, excuse me, and learn to contextualize them. And for me, the win is this. The win is not that you just take what I do and you just copy and paste what I do, but the win is you take what I say and what others are going to say in different video clips I'm going to provide for you tonight, and you can take it even further and deeper and just contextualize it to where you're at. One more thing I want to say before I get started into the to the engagements I'm going to share is one major truth to keep in mind is let's not focus on what we cannot do, but let's focus, you ready, on what we can do. So what can we do? I have 5 engagements. Almost think like lanes or columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 engagements, and here's the first one. And most of my time tonight will be in the first one, okay? Engage in local opportunities. Yes, engage in local opportunities. A buddy of mine, Tim Reagan, he's a student pastor down in Roanoke, Virginia. That's an hour from me. And on Facebook, he wrote this. When I threw this question out, what are some options? Tim threw this back, and I love it. Tim says, contact a ministry friend who pastors a church in an area that's not necessarily like your student's home church. And ask them, can we facilitate like a vacation Bible school, maybe help us in children's ministry? In other words, you offer, hey, how can we be your extension? How can we help serve you? A great suggestion. My son Ryan, last summer, what they did in 2020, he took his missions trip and his summer camp and kind of blended or made like a hybrid out of it. In other words, during the daytime, morning and afternoon, they did many service projects with local Christian, faith-based ministries and even faith-based ministries. And they just did different service projects around their community. They had their shared meals together. Then in the evening, think summer camp, okay, they had sessions that evening to be charged up in the Word of God. And then they spent time, think D now, in host homes. Rinse and repeat the next day for 5 days. What I loved it too was all their church staff. Boom, you ready? All their church staff jumped on board. All of them, lead pastor, children's director, worship, they all jumped in. They said, we're rolling up our sleeves. We're all going to be part of the student ministry that week. Love it. Another idea would be even dial it back to a simpler plan. Maybe some of the folks in your church are not ready to have their child staying in a home. Okay, well, let's dial it back. What if you just did some various service projects and ministry opportunities during the day, mornings, have lunch together, do some afternoon things, and then they just go home at night? Maybe you also provide, which I recommend, you also provide some kind of discipleship materials. Maybe even provide some breakout time for small group growth engagement with each other, some worship time together as they're also going out and serving. Now, local opportunities. I'm going to tell you a back in the day Rich Brown story. This was the 90s, okay, so here we go. I'm in Seattle at that point. Our student ministry team, we had 15 to 20 in that team that year. We were going from Western Washington to Eastern Washington. Going to work in a small church, provide a VBS, kind of the standard, thing, right? A month before our trip, I get an email from the senior pastor apologizing, but he's just resigned and the church board has said they don't want to have an outside group coming in. So basically have a nice day. Thank you, but we don't need you now. So I take that to our team that weekend during our weekly training time on Sunday nights. And I go, hey guys, here's where we're at. The trip to the city is off. So we have 2 choices. Either we bag the whole thing or we pivot, we come up with a new suggestion. And they wrestled and they said, we don't want to stop. We want to do something. I said, well, I have an idea. Now, I already talked to my lead pastor about this, okay? So it was all, he gave me the green light. I said, what if we actually stayed in our town, Kent, Washington, stayed in our town, made the church our CENTCOM, that's military for our central and command, our hub. We had all our meals at our church. We stayed in homes in our church, but you didn't go home. I wouldn't even go to my office, and I didn't. I literally did not go to my office during that week. I walked by it, didn't go in it because I knew I'd get distracted. I wanted to stay on mission. So we treated it almost like we weren't really at home, but we were. And then I had our leadership team come up with their suggestions on what we could do to connect with adolescents in our own community, not 4 hours away, but take the same principles that they were learning for the last 3 months in training time to do in our town. So they came up with ideas. I said, where do teenagers hang out? This was 90s, right? Skater park. Remember that big baggy pants? Green Day, everything, right? So they skater park. So cool, sweet. So we had skater parks, we identified basketball courts. Where do teenagers hang out? We did some other things as well. Just to create conversations, to bring bottles of water. We wanted to start getting to know unsafe students in our community. I even gave them various surveys. Kind of like, hey, if you want to, as you're chatting with them, hey, can we take a survey? We're just curious, what do you think are, and we kind of took it from like a big circle out, right? Like, what do you think are some of the social ills of today's adolescents? What are teenagers struggling with? And then if that teenager they were just meeting and talking with wanted to go deeper, would you like a new survey, another survey? Sure, man, because we all want to share our opinions. You know, that was before Facebook. Now we have all the, never mind. So everyone's always wanted to share their opinion, right? So then the next one may be, well, what are some of teenagers' views on God and religion? You see the circles are now, concentric circles are not coming in. So it went from like people out there to them as teenagers to then what are some of your views? And then if they felt the Spirit's connecting and the Lord was in this conversation and there wasn't resistance but actually openness, I said to them, keep going with the conversations. And by the way, they did this and it was awesome. And then it got into, what is your view of God? What's your view of the Bible? And then as the door opened, Colossians 4, open up my heart, my mouth, open up the door for ministry, open up my mouth to share the gospel, open up their heart to receive. There were students that were able to share Jesus. We also made sure that every student that we talked with were given an invitational card because, see, at the end of the week was a big rally, a big show, a big party we were going to have at our church. Some may think, dude, why would you want to have them come to your church? It was simple, because I wanted the unsafe students of our community to know we have something for them every week during the school year, and this is where we do it. So while we're going out to go and tell, we're also doing come and see. We were doing both, not either or. That Friday night came, unsafe teenagers came. 2 weeks later, I love this. This is what I miss, okay? 2 weeks later, we did a back-to-back-to-back nights, 3 nights in a row, of that same idea of a youth rally. A lot of hype, a lot of fun. All you young lifers, be proud of us, okay? It was great. It was a blast. Took a break halfway through it. They went downstairs, we fed them, came back upstairs, the auditorium, took it to a deeper level, shared the gospel. Students were, for the first time, this is Seattle, for the first time, were really hearing and understanding the gospel message for 3 nights in a row. That's when we actually had some gang teenagers starting to come to our church. And I won't take you down that road, but oh my goodness, it was such a powerful time in our ministry. That's when I say we went from a youth group to a student ministry. And it was a simple, just local trip. Before I bounce to our next one, I want to say one more thing about the local. Because of what we've gone through in 2020 and now 2021, I say more than ever, as people are hurting, more than ever, we need to love on our own Jerusalems. Suicide, as you know, is going through the roof. Depression, mental illness, crime, drugs, alcohol. People are hurting. More than ever, right in our own Jerusalems. Maybe the Lord is saying, hey, time out to other things and time in to where you live. Just think about it. The second engage is engage in smaller trips and even engage in smaller teams. In other words, maybe not have a big centralized team, but decentralize your team into smaller teams. Can I almost think like Matthew 11, Jesus sent them out 2 by 2. Now, you may not do that with teenagers. Maybe they're small groups. Got 2 student pastors, 2 good friends of mine, watch their interviews, or watch their video clips. Matt McClay from Huntington, West Virginia, followed by Justin Lucas, north part of Charlotte, North Carolina. Both share some great ideas.
Hey, Doc, here's an idea that we're looking into. We're not necessarily committed to it, but an option that we're looking into this year in our student ministry for mission trip and mission trips is to have first available 2 trips. The first trip would be a trip that would be more regional, maybe within an hour or 2 drive, maybe a rural area where there isn't as much COVID exposure, and parents would be more comfortable sending their students. So that would be a great way to get students involved for the first time and to really build momentum around continuing to go on mission trips. Then the second trip would be an international trip. Now, we might take that in spring break or take it during fall break or even take it also during the summer, but make that only available for upperclassmen, juniors, seniors. They would have to raise their own money. Parents could possibly go along with them if they wanted to, and it would be to the country and through the ministry that we would be serving with next summer in 2020. So you take a handful, maybe 3 or 4 seniors or juniors or seniors, let them get excited about it, let them have a great experience, let parents see how we do trips and how we do it safely, so they come back pumped up, ready to go back next year and take their friends with them. So that's just a thought. Praying for all the youth ministers and youth pastors as they're trying to figure out what God has them to do.
If you're like me, this is the second summer in a row where I've had to cancel or postpone our summer camps and summer mission trips. And we've looked at it and said, well, there's still a community that needs the gospel and needs the ministry of our church. And so what we decided to do is, instead of become hung up on the setbacks of COVID, we've looked at COVID and tried to be creative in working around it. We've repositioned our ministry to focus a lot more on our small groups. And so our small groups are our priority, so they can gather in smaller numbers. But then we can also send them out in a number that is manageable. But what this required of us and our team was to look at our small group leaders and say, we must equip you and train you to lead and lead well. So what they do is they look at our community, they find local places that could use the assistance of a handful of teenagers, and they go out in the community. This is both middle schoolers and high schoolers, it doesn't matter. And they go out and they serve and they open up doors for the gospel and the ministries of our church. And so, for instance, our 7th grade girls went to a local thrift store and helped organize and serve their thing. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but that thrift store actually sends most of their profits and a lot of their workers are kids from the Children's Home of Iredell County. So they get to come in, learn important life skills, be supported financially, and get to hear the gospel. And so this is a really incredible ministry. We have sent students to our local pregnancy support center. We have sent students to a local elementary school to do landscaping, which helped build our relationship with our local body and community. And so find the local aspects and the local places in your community that need help, and equip and release your small groups or smaller groups of students and leaders to go out and do the work of the ministry.
Hey, our last 2 E's aren't long at all. 30 is this: engage with existing sending ministries. Engage with existing sending ministries. Many ministries that are doing student mission trips are still available. I had the most fun last Friday. Had an hour and a half on a video call with Doug Franklin. He's the founder and president of LeaderTreks. LeaderTreks with a K.org. Check out their website. For 20 plus years, their ministry has been taking teenagers on mission trips and providing curriculum for leadership development, both students and adults. Doug's a man. Check them out. Hey, tomorrow I have another video call with a gentleman who's my brother in Christ, but I've not yet met. Not until tomorrow. His name's David. He's with Apex Ministries in Pennsylvania. Many of you are familiar with Fuge. Some of you have your other denominations have some other opportunities. Think how you could partner with other ministries. Last engage, partnering with other missionaries. Now, this I'm going to kind of stop with, because that actually segues into next week, both my features conversation with Robbie as well as the next focus. But I'm going to say it again. Engage by partnering with other missionaries. How can we learn to serve the families of these missionaries, not just while we're with them, but for 11 and a half months of the year apart from our trips? I want us to have you start thinking how you could have your students begin thinking, how could we serve those missionaries, just not while we're with them, but during the year, all throughout the year. A lot to think about, right? Hey, last thing I want to say before I wrap up. I have another engage, okay? How's this? In all things, engage by serving, but also engage by speaking. See, I think too many mission trips in student ministries, they're good at service projects. They do serving. I'm going to take a chance with you. You may not like what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it. When we do service projects, but we don't teach our students how to speak the gospel, that's not a mission trip. You can call it a ministry trip, but it's not a mission trip. A mission trip is to have the mission of Matthew 28, and that is to make disciples. Now in John 9, Jesus met a physical need. The blind man had his sight restored. But Jesus wasn't done. He also met a spiritual need. And the man had his spiritual blindness removed, and he could spiritually see. We need to do both. Both physical service, visible presentations of the gospel, but also teach our students to have verbal presentations of the gospel. Make sense? All right. Well, I'm excited. You guys have a great summer. Start dreaming, start praying, start talking to your leaders. Get jacked up. Let's be on mission. Have a great week.